Any comments? Otherwise, a motion?
Second.
Great. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, those are approved. Next item is the annual report, which we also have to vote on. Read it. I was impressed by it. And two things in particular, I think. One is that you named lots of people individually who were responsible for different things and thanked them for that, credited them with their work. I think that's a really nice touch.
Yeah, that's great. It's good to know.
Yeah.
And it's good for us to do that because we have a lot of individuals who are doing a lot of work. So just as to backtrack for a second, the Executive Law 833, which establishes the ILS board, one of the functions of the board is to produce an annual report that is submitted to the governor's office, to the assembly and to the Senate. And so historically, we, of course, I've always drafted the annual report and submitted it to the board for the board's approval. And so that's what this annual report is before you for your approval. And of course, any suggested changes or amendments were certainly, that's what you're for. I'm not going to go over everything in the report because then we would be here all day. But I do want to highlight a few things. And so, I'll do it sort of team-based. My approach in highlighting is team-based. So I'll start with our criminal defense representation team, which in 2025 had to work with all the counties in New York City on adding funding to their contracts. But that work isn't just a matter of like throwing numbers into a spreadsheet and sending it out. That work involves working on a plan on how that money will be spent. And so the team really worked with all of the counties, the public defense providers and the county officials on developing those plans to spend the money in the most cost-effective and appropriate way and really address where there were shortfalls. So that was a lot of work. Another highlight, though, from what the work of the criminal defense representation team was the work that the team has been doing with Gideon's Promise. Gideon's Promise is a national organization devoted to working with public defender offices on their culture and cultivating a culture of a client-centered mission. And the goal here is to really ensure that public defenders are oriented in their work, but also feel fulfilled by their work. And so the work of Gideon's Promise can also help public defender offices really recruit and retain people too, because people, come to an office where there's clarity in the goal and the mission and the work that we're doing for clients and the meaning of that work. And so, we've been working with Gideon's Promise now for several years. Claire Knittel is the lead from ILS who's cultivated that relationship and worked with them on several different leadership programs in New York, and have trained several public defense leaders across New York on, how to build that culture. And in offices that have fully adopted the Gideon's Promise leadership training values and goals, they actually have not struggled with retention and they have not struggled with recruitment. So it's actually, working. And so Gideon's Promise awarded ILS in the summer their Ambassador Award for the work that we've done in connecting them with being an ambassador, if you will, with public defenders across New York. Our family court representation team, this was quite a year for the team. With the $25 million that was appropriated in this current year's budget for improved quality family court representation, they had to work with the counties and the public defense providers on developing plans for spending that money. And so it involved a lot of contract actions, right? So for 15 counties, it was new contracts. For several other counties, it was adding funding to existing contracts. And for some counties, it was extending the contracts with additional funding, or a combination of all of those. So it's a lot of sort of contracting actions, all of which, like I said, involve a plan, right? And so they have really been working very hard and very effectively with counties on the plans. And having some great outcomes. In Erie County, for example, the assigned counsel program has historically been the only provider of family court representation. And because of the work of the family court representation team, Erie County now is going to contract with the Legal Aid Bureau of Buffalo to start to take some family court cases, particularly in the Article 10 cases or the child welfare cases. So that's exciting news. The statewide appellate support center under Claudia's leadership. I just keep, every year they're upping their game on the work that they're doing, both in terms of resource development, trainings, case consultations. I think, Claudia, you had over 700 case consultations in 2025, which is a huge jump from previous years, which shows that attorneys across the state are really valuing this resource. But one of the initiatives that they did this year or this past year that I really appreciated was focusing on supporting appellate attorneys who want to seek leave to the Court of Appeals. And so they're assisting appellate attorneys on leave applications. If leave is granted, they're assisting attorneys and consulting with them on the brief writing. And then they've also done a few Court of Appeal moots.
So many.
Which for them is time consuming, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, you know,
it is.
yeah,
It's always fun to watch the arguments and then see the opinions and win a few.
yeah. And
And like, so much.
so that's, I'm very excited. I think we all are about that initiative. Our research team has for years, of course, been working with public defense providers on improving their institutional capacity to report data to ILS. Hi, Diane. And they continued that work this year. And of course, they're responsible for collecting that data and then analyzing it and then talking to all of us about what that means. And then, of course, some of the reports that we have to produce. So they continued that work. In 2025, two initiatives that I thought were very exciting was one, they conducted over the course of the second half of 2025 regional data convenings in regions across New York, where they invited the people who are involved in data collection and reporting to come and meet their peers from other counties and other offices. And I had the opportunity to attend the one in Western New York, and it was excellent to see the excitement and also the appreciation of their work being valued and honored, and also like creating a culture of collaboration too with other data officers and people involved in data collection in other places. So that was a very exciting initiative. And then in addition, historically we've done different reports sort of speaking to different sets of data that we get from public defense providers. And this year, the research team said, let's do one report that brings all the data together for one calendar year. And so this 2025 was our inaugural data report. And from my perspective, it was very exciting to read this report and see, it's almost like seeing the pieces of the puzzle put together. The data puzzle, if you will. And so that was, that went over very well, both with people within ILS now who can sort of start to see the pieces fit together, but also the people to whom we submit these reports, the Division of Budget and the executive. Our grants unit, 2025 was the first year that they were fully staffed. And what I really appreciated about how they work with bringing in new staff and new people was an openness to the perspectives that new people add to the grants unit's work. And so, sometimes somebody who's outside the organization can see things that you're not seeing, right? And so Jamie Blair, who oversees our grants unit, was really good about creating a space where these perspectives, where there's a place to go and talk about them. And so in addition to onboarding new people, I've also just seen incredible streamlining of processes while still maintaining, the accountability that we need. And so a good example is 4 years ago, when I would send a budget and a work plan to the grants unit to then process and send out as part of a contract or a budget amendment. Often I wouldn't see them send the contract or budget amendment out for days, sometimes weeks. Now it's literally sometimes minutes. It's like really fast. And so, and the same with the claims, like they're really processing claims in a very, efficient way, taking advantage of technology, and so doing more online and more electronically, but also in a way that's, cultivating the relationships that they have with the public defense providers and county officials who are submitting claims. And that relationship building is critical to making sure that they understand the claim, they get the information they need, and they can move forward quickly. And so, money's going out the door, both because the contracts now are there and the claims processing is more efficient in ways, that we haven't seen before. And so the work that they're doing, they're where the rubber hits the road, right? If the money doesn't flow, then the work can't happen. And so the work they're doing is so critically important. And then our administration team kept the office running while we're onboarding 10 new people, looking internally at ways, new protocols, new procedures, and also administrative efficiencies, better communication, that kind of thing. And then our IT folks rolled out a new website, which was very exciting in 2025. And now I really enjoy going to our website. I'm on it quite a bit. Learning a lot about what we're doing. So, these are just some of the highlights. There's, obviously a lot more in the report, and more that everybody in the office is doing to promote the work that we're doing in our mission. So I wanted to pause here and see if anybody had questions or comments about what they read in the report.
Just say, first of all, congratulations on the Michelle Maxim to you and your team.
Thank
That's
you.
wonderful. But one of the things that really struck me about the report is how forward-looking the organization is, and that you never just sit and continue to do what you're doing, but you're always finding ways of doing cutting-edge things and expanding the opportunities for indigent defense across the state. So thank you for that.
Thank you. We have a very creative and innovative team.
Nothing further then, there's a motion.
So moved to accept the report.
All in favor?
Aye.
Approved. Daniel, pretty good.
So the one part of the report that I didn't touch upon and that I'm going to touch upon now is ILS's ongoing office culture work that we want to have grounded in values of diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility. And I just wanted to take a step back for a second and, talk about what led to this work. And a lot of what led to this work was our staff telling us in mid to late 2024 that in recognition that we had grown exponentially in a short amount of time, and we were working fast to take advantage of increased state funding. But it led to leadership, me largely, being more proactive or being more reactive than proactive, and also focusing too much on the outcome without being sufficiently attentive to the process and the people involved. And so their concerns about that led to ILS doing, first retaining a vendor, Sherry Haltz from Chrysalis, and really, Chrysalis training and development, because we knew we needed outside expertise to do this work. And Cherie helped us both with a survey in late 2025 that she said somewhat unprecedented. We had 100% participation, which she's like, normally doesn't happen. And then following up the survey was listening to her to delve more deeply into what was said in the survey. And, you know, I want to emphasize again that this was done because staff told us it needed to be done. And I want to credit people in our office for having the courage and the wherewithal to say that out loud and to come forward and say, you guys got to work on our office culture. Because that's hard, right? And I'm not gonna lie, it was hard to read the survey results and to, you know, hear the concerns and realize the mistakes that I was making and things that we needed, you know, how that was impacting and contributing to poor morale of our office, right? And so, you know, the nice thing about the survey and also the listening tour was it was not just a litany of complaints. Instead, it was an accounting of where there are problems and recommendations for next steps. And I really appreciated that people weren't just focused on, you know, the problems and complaints. They were actually focused on how can we make ILS a better office culture to promote our mission and to promote diversity, equity, and inclusion values. And so, you know, so we sort of were grounded in what needed to be done. And in 2025, you know, we focused on a few initiatives that came out of the report, the surveys and the recommendations. And one was being attentive to salaries. As we note in the report, because our staff are classified as management confidential, they don't receive the regular salary increases that their peers in other state agencies tend to receive. They do get the cost of living, but that's not really a salary increase. That's just the salary being commensurate with the cost of living. So we developed a protocol for requesting on an annual basis salary increases for staff to honor their tenureship with ILS. So, because we have to, you know, every salary increase we have to request through the budget director approval process. We also, and Burton did a beautiful job with this, had an office meeting where we talked about the state salary setting scale so that there's a little bit more transparency and clarity in how salaries are set. And that was important to staff to understand decision-making on salaries. We also engaged in leadership and supervision, training and support. And so Burton and I have been have been engaged in executive coaching since mid-2025, which I found very valuable. And then in later 2025, we had a day and a half in-person training session with Shuri, which actually turned more into a retreat, which was really valuable. We did a follow-up half-day virtual training session, and now our supervisors are engaging in one-on-one coaching, supervisor coaching. We've worked on cross-unit collaboration. You know, how do you promote the same mission, but working from different parts of it and different aspects of it? And so we've had regular meetings with unit heads to talk about that. We developed a document that specifies and clarifies what the team roles are that can help, you know, with clarity in that collaboration. But part of that document is an expectation of collaboration. Where are the areas of overlap where you are expected to work effectively and collaborate together? And we also made some efforts at office camaraderie. So, you know, try to use our staff meetings effectively to cultivate highlighting accomplishments of individual staff members and teams. We had 2 days of service where, you know, staff members had the opportunity to spend the morning in the volunteer site, which I really enjoyed, and I think people really enjoyed it, and then came back for lunch. We had a couple of luncheon views where we would view a documentary and then talk about it. And then our annual holiday gathering with a very competitive white elephant gift exchange. So, very funny. But also, I think one of the most important things we did, and we've talked to this board about that, is the organizational development specialist position. And we finally got approval in our state operations budget for fiscal year 25-26 to bring on this incredibly important new position. Christine Becker, our director of operations, had to go through the civil service process to actually create the position. Then we had to engage in recruitment and interviewing. And so I'm going to put a pin on that and talk about that in a second. But I think the biggest accomplishment, I hope that the biggest accomplishment that we've had is helping our staff really feel that we're sincere about this, that this is not pro forma, that we really want to listen to them, incorporate their ideas, and be attentive to cultivating a culture that is collaborative, inclusive, and transparent, and really values the expertise and experiences and insights that people bring to the table. We have a lot of work ahead of us. Sometimes I look back and I'm like, I didn't accomplish everything I wanted in 2025, but that's okay. We're continuing to move forward. And, if we're really honest about this, it'll never end. We'll never be finished. Because there should always be that opportunities for reflection, input, and, being able to change in a positive way. I mean, we ask our providers to do that. And we've got to be prepared to do that as well. So today, I want to give you an opportunity to hear from our new organizational development specialist, as well as from Claudia Truve about her experiences in this process. But I'll start with Luchelli Jacinka, who is our new organizational development specialist, but who is not new to ILS. Luchelli started in ILS in 2018 as the analyst for the statewide implementation team. And in 2021, she became our inaugural DEI liaison, which is an unpaid position where she's just, working as part in conjunction with her regular position, but doing this special work of promoting our attention to DEI values. I don't have time to list all of Luchelli's accomplishments as the DEI liaison, but in a short amount of time, just three things to highlight. One is she developed a hiring toolkit, which really upped our game in how we, go about recruiting, interviewing, and onboarding new staff. And it's gone through 2 iterations now because we sort of did a soft rollout, learned a lot from that, came back, reevaluated, and updated it more recently. And I can tell you that I've had people who I've interviewed, and I think all of our managers can say, candidates talk to us about how impressed they are with our interviewing process and our recruiting process. And we're starting to hear people talk about how impressed they are with our onboarding process. And this is all because of Luchelli and the work that she's done in working with both our administrative staff, but also our team leaders and really being thoughtful and professional about this. Luchelli was also a key member of the Inclusive Language Guidelines Working Group. And it was that working group that came to Bert and me and said, you guys need to work on office culture. And so, as a member of that working group, she not only was part of creating guidelines to guide all of us in how to be more thoughtful about the language we use, but it really was the impetus for the work that we're doing on improving our office culture. And then finally, and perhaps most importantly, Luchelli has impeccable integrity and judgment. And I think her colleagues like see it and feel it. And they trust her and talking to her about the concerns that they have and knowing that she's going to exercise really good judgment on how to address that concern or just be a sounding board. And Bert and I are often the people she has to address the concern with. And I have to say, I'm just so impressed with how she talks about the concerns that people bring to her attention in a way that's very accessible for us. Like we can really sort of feel and understand what she's saying and not feel judged or defensive, which I really credit her for. But she also does it in a way that like she protects the confidentiality of people. And so, you know, it's never like who said this. It's always like, okay, this, how do we address this? How do we move forward? So I think, you know, I'm very excited about Lucelli because she's really starting with a strong base in this position. So I'm going to turn it over to her now.
Wow. Trisha, you have raised the bar quite high. Hello, everyone. I'm so happy to be joining you in my new capacity as Organizational Development Specialist. And as Patricia said, I'm new to the role, but not new to ILS. And I actually think that's very important because my perspective coming into this role and my approach with this role, I think is always as a staff member. Someone who is a staff member, someone who is not a part of leadership, but someone who was in community and was able to speak openly with my colleagues about the issues that we have been facing over the last 8 years. And so when this position came about, I thought really, really hard about whether or not I wanted to take it because it is a lot of work. And we have been through a lot. And, you know, as a staff member, I really was able to see each inflection point of why we got the results that we got from the climate survey. We had rapid growth, we experienced attrition, we, you know, had people leadership changes, and while we were helping our 120 plus providers grow in each individual county, we kind of left ourselves behind internally. And so all of this is now an opportunity to provide a space and support for the people who work at ILS who are doing this incredibly important work every single day. And so that's my approach to this role. So with that said, so how can we move forward into actually transforming our office culture and making progress and really sustaining all of the work that we've been doing? And one of the ways that we're going to do that is I'm going to create an employee resource group. And the inclusive language working group kind of became unintentionally an ERG, and that we came together to discuss inclusive language. And it was one of the first times that we had a diverse group of people come together, one person from each unit, and really have an open forum about some of the things that people were experiencing in the office. And I have to mention Kingston, Kira, Catherine, Kim Martell, and Leah, because they were key members of the Inclusive Language Working Group and I worked alongside them to get us to the place where we were able to do the climate survey. And so I hope that with starting an ERG, there is a formal place for staff members to go with questions and concerns, but also a place where we're able to build community and able to have a group of people that comes together and is intentional and invested in maintaining that buy-in that we got with staff, that 100% participation in doing this work and recognizing that it's important every single day. And so coming up will be the ERG. I think that will be one of the first things that I'll work on. And then the second is creating an employee handbook. ILS is a hosted agency. We're hosted by OGS, Office of Government.
Yeah.
So the job is officially general services, yes. What that means is we're kind of in no man's land. We are not necessarily in alignment with other state agencies in terms of policies and procedures. We are an incredibly small agency. When the state thinks of a small agency, they think of 500 people. We're not even at 60 employees. And so we are in a very unique place where sometimes people have questions about why are there pay disparities? When I look at the website for the state, it says that we're on the schedule, and why isn't that happening at ILS? Well, it's not happening because that actually doesn't apply to us. And so I'm hoping that with the creation of the employee handbook, we're able to kind of fill the gap of what the state is putting out and reduce the confusion of what ILS is actually able to do. And also just in general, to be able to create policies and procedures and put it down on paper in a place where people can go and look with confidence and say, okay, these are the expectations. This is what I have to look forward to. And if I have questions, now I kind of have a starting place of where I can go. And so I believe that the employee handbook, creating an employee handbook, will hopefully be very, very helpful to staff in closing the gap of some of the human resources issues and questions that they've had over the years. And then kind of looking to the future, probably most likely in 2027, but I think will be one of the most important things that we do is strategic planning. And you know, over these last few years, I believe Melissa always says this, we have been building the road while we walk on it.
Yeah.
And we have had a lot of wins, but they've come in a good way, quite quickly. And we haven't really had a time to plan. And so some of the decisions that we have made have been reactive, but it's because we're just kind of trying to hold on while we're doing this work. And I think that we are finally in a place where we are able to kind of pause and take into account everything that has happened and really be intentional about where we want to go, where we want this work to go, where we want our office to go, and a plan for sustaining it. And I think that that is going to be transformative for ILS. I think it's going to be transformative for our staff and really helpful for our staff. And I'm very much looking forward to being a part of that process. I don't think of anything that we're doing as impossible because I'm sure there was a time where the work that we're doing, our office even existing, was thought of as impossible. Whoever thought that statewide funding would happen? No. So like, we're never going to be able to open a Western New York center. We'll never have an appellate support center. You know, I think of it now, even in terms of our family court funding, of not if it can happen, but when it will happen. And so I really take that approach and that mindset as I go forward. And I hope to continue to be a resource for staff. And hopefully they still feel comfortable coming to speak to me and to Bridge in doing this work and helping us to move forward.
So before we moved on to Claudia to hear her perspective on the work that's been done this past year, I just wanted people to have an opportunity to ask Bocelli any questions or make any comments.
I just have a little something to ask. I was looking for the microphone and stuff in the video to see when you said DEI, and I thought that was a term that we were forbidden to use. I got a little nervous. What's going on? Is that a term that you still use?
We actually still have this board has approved all of our work and are focused on diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility, and incorporating those values is that work. But two, I think we're lucky as a state that we have a governor who's still, you know, a lot of the work that, Lucia, that you do is with the governor's office
Yeah.
and some of their initiatives.
So that's actually one of the first things, the message that we got from the governor's office was New York State is going to continue doing DEIA work. And we are going to assist you as much as we can in terms of, you know, agencies that are, funding is being impacted. We want to support you as much as possible, and that's not going to change in New York as of right now, so.
Well, I'd like to say this in terms of that, they have made such a negative attitude about when it comes up with DEI. And it's almost, people have taken it as an embarrassment because they don't want to feel less than anybody else. So I don't know what the breakdown is in your office. You have 60 workers, I think you said, you know, but I'm sure you've had that discussion with them and how did they, I know that in Westchester, it's not gonna go over very well, you know, because they don't want anybody to think that they got something differently than anybody else and that they are lower than anybody else. So I'm a little concerned about, you know, perceptions of that term.
Yeah.
You know, take the I out and put an A in there or something, or switch it around. But how did your staff feel about that?
I think that that is a very valid concern. And I believe that one of the important parts of this role is to remind everyone that DEIA is not just a black and white issue. It's not just a gender issue. While doing this work, we were able to address pay disparity. We have been able to address, you know, we didn't know where there was a lactation room, and we have had people who have had children in our office, and now we have been able to identify that. We have people in our office who require, you know, need religious accommodations, and we're able to accommodate that. You know, I think that, you know, we have people in our office who are veterans, and, you know, they have very specific issues that need to be addressed, and we are able to accommodate that. And so I think that
They're not the ones that were criticized.
they're not the ones that were
They're not the
criticized.
ones who, when a plane crashes and it's the
Yeah.
TSA person or whatever, you know, because they might have been a DEI person, you know, so they don't have the credentials or anything else. I understand what you're saying, and I'm not against it or anything, but I'm just saying right now, it's not a favorable term for us. When we look at Ketanji Jackson, I swear, oh, she's a DEI, you know, those are things that are very hurtful. And I don't want to stand out I don't want that label. I don't want a label on me anymore. I want to be just like anybody else in this room. I want to have that standard. I don't want anything, I don't want any more labels put on me. You know, so I'm just a little itchy about it, you know.
Yeah.
I hear what you're saying, I like what you're saying, you know, but.
Yeah, and I think that talking about it and discussing it and continuing to do the work is important to be able to overcome things like that. And to be able to get everyone to a place, and it does require some education. And it does require some, you know, awareness of, you know, this is very intentional attack that's happening. And to not necessarily think of it on an individual level, but this is a means of systematically ending progress that has been made. And I think when you think about DEIA, we're thinking about doing it in our offices, but we're also, you know, that extends to the providers that we're working with, who many of whom have clients who are disenfranchised, many of whom have clients who are coming from marginalized communities. And I think it does them a disservice to hide from DEIA, because I think doing this work and recognizing it and naming it, saying it, is a part of fighting against kind of the eye of the federal government that's coming for the work that we do. So I definitely understand those concerns. But I think that, kind of walking through the fire and just looking forward is the way that we have to.
I just want to make sure that you water to pour.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I think it was last year, I don't remember if it was June or September, when we talked about the creation of the position that we now has. And I said at the time how impressed I was with your leadership for bringing that need forward. I think you made an incredible hire, and congratulations, welcome to the team in this new role. But I want to go back to something you said a couple times, Patricia. You talked about when you did the climate survey in the office, you talked about the unprecedented 100% participation and the courage of your staff members to come forward and do that. And I agree with that wholeheartedly, but I think you didn't give you and Burton credit either. There's courage from leadership to sit down openly and take that feedback. And instead of getting defensive or instead of explaining it away, you looked at it and said, got to deal with this. And you've done it proactively. You've obviously done it very intentionally. So I just wanted to take a second and say credit to you two for how you handled that. And thank you, because I think that's what your office obviously needs.
Thank you. Yeah. I think it's also the way I won't lie, I spent, after looking at the survey results and the listening tour, I had a very teary weekend. But and I think this is what I love about my office is a necessary part of being able to do reform is to always see the opportunity. Is to, even in the darkest, and it's a little bit of, my comments when I accepted the award is like that hope and that, being able to go forward. And the other thing, I committed to my staff, and I don't live this every day, and I'm trying to, but to do it with a sense of joy. Because I really believe that's important, being joyful and laughing and, humor, they're just so important. And I think they're also, Diane, some of the antidote to some of the, ugliness that we're seeing currently. And so, I think everybody in the office is sort of having that same attitude, but thank you for that. So Claudia, I'm going to introduce Claudia, actually. Claudia Troop is our, how long? 2 years. Yeah, gosh.
Can't believe it.
Yeah, she's been our director of quality improvement for appellate representation and post-conviction representation. Claudia's really stood up the statewide appellate support center and the work that they're doing, and comes to ILS with deep experience both in appellate work but also leadership, and very innovative in thinking about not only the work that the statewide appellate support center is doing, but also the work that ILS is doing, from the big picture. So, Claudia.
Thank you. So I wanted to be here today because I think I have a little bit of an unusual perspective on leadership training and coaching, because this is actually the third time that an organization that I've been at has gone through the process of climate survey listening tour and outside recommendations. I like to think it's not about me, but what's the common factor there? I like to think it's not about me, but I think there are, like a lot of people at ILS, I come from a background in public defense. And morale and climate, as those of you who have spent time in public defense now, is always an issue. And the reasons are familiar to all of us, right? Enormous caseloads. People who come to us with trauma and often suffering from mental illness, and being witness to a system that can be really inhumane and cause suffering. And so throughout my career, it has always been sort of an issue within the offices that I've worked. And having gone through it 3 times, I have to say that I wasn't really that excited to go through it again. I wasn't. I learned about it before I joined ILS at my first board meeting when I was introduced. And I think I looked across at Jill and I said, uh-oh. What are we getting ourselves into? Because sometimes these things can feel like one more thing on your to-do list. That said, I have been really impressed with the thoughtfulness and thoroughness of the programming that ILS has undertaken. And when I say thoughtfulness, I mean that it was so important because of the concerns that were raised by the staff. It was so important that the programming that we adopted, and Patricia and Burton, who were there with us, if whatever I'm saying, feel free to chime in. It was so important that what we undertook was responsive to what our staff was saying we needed, and leadership training was something that staff really felt was necessary. So it wasn't just like we went and there was one program that the Chrysalis was doing for everybody. They gave us a menu of options that we could choose from, modules that we could learn. And we spoke about it amongst ourselves and amongst the people we were working with. And we said, what do you think we need? And based on that feedback, we selected the modules that we were going to be focusing on. And then Chrysalis solicited from everybody across the organization hypothetical situations that you have been dealing with, like real life situations that have caused you grief or stress, and anonymize those and work them into the programming. So when we met in October, at the beginning of October, for a full day and a half of in-person training, again, 100% of the supervisors were there in person. I think there's something really valuable about just coming together. Even if you just sat in a room and talked, I think that would have been a valuable day. But the first module that we focused on was building trust and creating psychological safety. And we thought that was really important to focus on first because that's foundational, right? You can't get to the point where you're giving constructive feedback or you're coaching your people effectively unless you have that baseline trust and psychological safety. So one of the first exercises we did when we were in the room is we all broke up into groups and we had whiteboards and we all wrote on the whiteboards, what are the things that create trust and psychological safety? And we all knew, we all had the same answers. That's what was so interesting. When we came back, everybody had written the same thing. Like trust exists when people feel safe to voice differences, where they feel heard, where they feel respected, when they're not worried that people are talking behind their backs or that there's an authenticity and a transparency about how decisions are being made. So it was all there, we all knew. And so the facilitator said, well, if you all know what you're doing, why isn't it happening? And so we really took that as an opportunity to examine what are our challenges at ILS. And we talked about how our team structure has traditionally led to not a whole lot of familiarity and collaboration because people were kind of siloed historically in their teams, which led to more difficulty speaking and meeting across team lines. We also talked about our physical structure, which is challenging because we're all on different floors in different elevator banks. So it's not like we're just wandering, if I want to go see Patricia, I have to think, okay, got to get down to the lobby, back up and go to her office. So it's not like ideal for fostering open communication and easy. And then there's our hybrid schedules, which we all love and value, but it means that a lot of times we're meeting virtually or over email, and that can be a kind of tone deaf mechanism of communicating. So there are all those, and also we focused on power dynamics and issues of positional authority. So I remember the first time that somebody who I was supervising introduced me as their boss. I had to kind of look around and see who she was talking about because I didn't consider myself her boss. I considered myself her supportive colleague. But that's just not true. If you are giving people work and you're telling them when to do it and you're evaluating them, you're their boss, and not recognizing those power dynamics doesn't create safety, it creates confusion. So we want to make sure that we are sensitive to those power dynamics. And so that was one of the exercises we did in that module. We also partnered up and shared an experience where we didn't feel psychologically safe. And we talked about that, and the other person had to listen and really key into the factors that were contributing to that. And that exercise I thought was useful for two reasons. One, it gave real world examples of what people were experiencing, but also just the act of making yourself vulnerable to your partner. The person I was partnered up with, I'd never spoken to before, and he's in a different unit. We'd never spoken, but here I am telling him something, a time that I felt vulnerable. And I think that is a very bonding experience, and the exercise of actively listening. So the next unit we moved, and I'm not going to go through every unit, don't worry, but the next unit we moved on to was giving constructive feedback. And when things don't go right, how do you give feedback to people in a way that's not going to undermine their confidence and is going to build trust and prop them up and coach them? And so one thing that we focused on was different methods of giving feedback. So like this SBI method, where you look at specific situations and behaviors, you talk about the impact it had on the team. So rather than if somebody comes to you and a report is late, let's say as an example that we used, you don't say to them, oh, well, this report is late again, you're always late, what's going on? You focus very specifically on the individual problem and the impact it has on the team. And so that type of coaching is more effective because it demonstrates the specificity of behavior. It's not personal. It's not like, oh, you're always late. It's like, this was a particular problem. So I think that's been really, it's not as if this is, that training is easily done once you have the training. It's not like, okay, now I know how to do everything, but it did give us all a shared framework, I think, in terms of how we're thinking about giving feedback and talking to each other with respect. So, and then after that was our in-person training. In January, we had the virtual training, and some of the concepts we focused on was the concept of adaptive leadership, which I found really useful. And the idea behind adaptive leadership is that people are at different stages. The people you're coaching, one size does not fit all, right? So people are at different stages of their development. And in order to coach effectively, you have to recognize where the people you're coaching are at. If you don't do that, that means you're going to be micromanaging your people who need more autonomy, and you're not going to have the energy to support the people who need more support. And so one thing that we focus on is like, we all have our default styles. So like, I was a product of the 70s and the 80s. And so I'm very used to like being left alone. And that's sort of like my comfort zone, like just go, don't come home until the sun's down. Like that was like my approach, but that doesn't work for everybody, right? And so even what was really interesting to me about this framework is that, I came to ILS, I've been in public defense for many, many years. And so for some of my job, I don't need any help. If a lawyer comes to me and asks me something about an appeal, it would be very rare where I hadn't heard what they're asking. Like there's nothing new under the sun for me in that area. But this year I worked on the caseload standards project. And even though I've been thinking about caseloads for years, I've never thought about caseload standards. And so at that level, I was a total beginner. And so I really needed more help, more assistance, and more coaching than I need in other parts of my job. And the framework helps me think about the people I'm coaching in a more adaptive way and figuring out what it is that they need, rather than, go out and drink from garden hoses and come back when you need it. So that was the leadership training. And then I'll get into coaching, but did you guys want to add anything to the leadership training?
No.
That's good. All right, and then coaching, once again, this is my third time around. So the first time that I had leadership coaching was when I had been promoted to a supervisor at one of my organizations. And like many people who are promoted in public defense, I was promoted not because I had any management background or because I had any people skills. It was because I could handle a lot of messy cases with not too much complaining. And the idea was like, well, if you can handle a lot of messy cases without too much complaining, maybe you can teach other people to handle a lot of cases without too much complaining. And that's the skill we value. But that led to a lot of conversations on my part of like, well, try harder, do better, work harder, and people would walk out of my office not feeling particularly valued or supported or know where to go. And so it was such a struggle that I actually hired my own coach with my own money to try to do better. The second time around, I was at an organization that was going through rapid organizational change, and I got 4 sessions that were paid for. I'm telling you this because to put into context what ILS is offering us, which is a full year with the opportunity to work with different coaches and to really develop our leadership style and focus on it. And I'll tell you what coaching is not, because I think a lot of times people don't know, is like coaching is not therapy. And it is not a way of saying, well, I'm doing it because my coach told me to, so I don't have to take responsibility for this particular decision, but it is a way of having a thought partner and somebody to help you through challenges. So it starts, for most of us, it started with an assessment, a strengths assessment. And you go in and they say, oh, you're good at this and good at this and good at this. And you feel pretty good. You're like, oh, I'm a connector. I like ideas. I'm a learner. Oh, I feel so good. And then I went into my coach and he's like, but you have to realize that within your strengths are your weaknesses. So you like working with a small group of trusted people and you develop those deep trust and relationships. That makes it harder for you to work outside that group. And so that's something you have to, and then I'm like, no, I don't feel so good about myself. But it is something, it's an interesting way of thinking about strengths and weaknesses. And your coaches help you when you're confronting a specific problem. So recently, a member of my team left, which always makes me sad. He went back to practice, which makes me happy because he's helping clients. But one thing that I default to when a member of my team leaves is I usually just like sop up all the work because I don't want my team to be disrupted. So I'm like, I'll do it, I'll handle it, I'll take it. And my coach really encouraged me to think about, that's not the effective way to do it. It's not good for you. It's not good for your team. It's not good for the people you're trying to serve. So think about making a plan. Think about how you want to do it more intentionally. And it's like that kind of working through individual problems to, and with the hope that practicing will make you better. And that's what I've seen with coaching. So I don't think this is, as Patricia said, this is endless work and it is going to continue. And I hope that, I have been impressed with just the effort. All there is like the trying, and that's all we can do. So thank you. I'm happy to answer any questions. If you have any.
Did we forget to
Yeah, you want to partner up? You want to talk? Judge Wilson, did you notice, like, when you became chief, that all of a sudden people treated you differently, or no, you didn't?
No, I did. It's not from.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, it's also negative.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's real, and you just gotta have to, like, how do you work? Because you're the same person.
I told somebody recently that, I always have doubts when people tell me that I've done something good,
Yeah.
whether they're being honest or whether they're just saying that because I have a title. And hard to parse through. With Carmen, I know it's always truthful.
Yeah.
Good advice and sometimes constructive criticism.
Yeah. I remember one time I was at a wedding with my husband and a lot of the people I supervised was there. And like I was telling a joke and everybody laughed. And afterwards my husband goes, they have to laugh at your jokes, right? And he's like, you're not that funny.
That's what
Well, more exciting matters. Burton, do you want to talk about the state budget update?
Sure. So in January, the governor introduced her executive budget proposal. For ILS, we had an all funds budget of just under $481 million in the executive budget proposal. And that was generally consistent with the budget request that was approved by this board back in September, with two exceptions. The first is as it regards to our state operations budget. Our state operations funding came in at the level that we were seeking. However, we do not yet have the authorization from the Division of Budget to create either of the two new positions that we were hoping to create this year. One is the coordinator for the Regional Immigration Assistance Centers, and the other was a Public Information Officer position. We are going to continue to work with the OB to see if we can get to a place where we're able to create at least one of those two new positions at some point next year. The other difference between the executive budget proposal and the budget request that was approved back in September has to do with our aid to localities funding, and specifically for the Family Court Representation Program. We had once again requested $50 million as part of a multi-year phase-in up to $150 million for family court representation. The budget proposal in January included $25 million. Now that does keep us consistent with where we ended up in last year's enacted state budget, which reflects a $5.5 million increase that the legislature was able to negotiate in last year's budget. So the good news there is even at $25 million, that is an increase in sort of the floor going forward for this program. The executive budget proposal also includes for the third straight year language that would authorize the State Division of Budget to transfer up to $234 million out of the Indigent Legal Services Fund into the state's general fund. Now, we know from conversations with the Division of Budget that $114 million of that authorized $234 million transfer accounts for the 18B rate increase reimbursement program through ILS, as well as the increased rates for the attorney for the child that goes to the Office of Court Administration. However, the other $120 million of that $234 million increase transfer authorization is seemingly unrelated to public defense. I mentioned that this is the third straight year that that language has been included in the executive budget proposal. 2 years ago, that language was included in the enacted budget, and the Division of Budget did not use that transfer authority beyond the actual amount that was claimed for the 18B rate increase reimbursement, as well as the AFC rates. So that was good. That was a transfer of funding that was consistent with the purpose of the ILS fund as established in State Finance Law, Section 98B. For the second year of that language being included in the budget, we are in that budget year currently. So we do expect there to be some transfer of funding out of the Indigent Legal Services Fund to the general fund by the end of the fiscal year, which is March 31st. So in the next couple of weeks, we expect to see some transfer of funding. It just remains to be seen, will it be the actual amount that was claimed for the ATB rate increase reimbursement and the attorney for the child rates, or will it also include some of that greater transfer authorization? So that was the executive budget proposal. Patricia testified in February at the joint legislative budget hearing on the public protection budget. Much of her testimony was focused largely on our concerns about that transfer authorization, as well as the need for family court funding. And then last week, the Senate and the Assembly both unveiled their legislative budget proposals, or one house budget proposals, which are their starting points for negotiations with the governor and the Division of Budget in the final weeks of the fiscal year. So there we saw the Senate one house proposal did increase our family court representation funding to $50 million, as well as fully rejecting the authorization to transfer funding out of the Indigent Legal Services Fund. The Assembly one house proposal increased the family court representation by $5 million to a total of $30 million, but accepted the transfer language. So as I mentioned, we're in a period now where negotiations are ongoing between the houses of the legislature and the executive. So it does remain to be seen where we land with all of this. While past results do not necessarily guarantee future outcomes, the fact that both the Senate and the Assembly are proposing additional funding for family court does mean there's a fairly strong possibility the final enacted budget will include more funding for family court representation than the $25 million included in the executive budget proposal. But again, remains to be seen. So as far as next steps, we will certainly update the board once we see what the final enacted budget looks like. And then at the June meeting, we will have an allocation plan for the board to consider for how to purpose funding that's included in this year's budget. So happy to entertain any questions folks may have.
You have any guess when the budget will come in?
Oh, I've been around long enough.
Are there betting markets on that?
That's a good question. That's a good question. But no, I've been around this game long enough to no longer make guesses or make personal travel plans. So when the budget's going to be done.
What needs to be done in order to remove the transfer language? What kind of lobbying is required? Bar associations?
Yeah, that's a great question. There are a number of organizations, the Chief Defenders Association, New York State Defenders Association, who, as well as the New York State Bar Association, I think the New York State Association of Counties as well.
Can speak to that.
Yeah, they've all, so there are a number of organizations that have indicated their opposition to that transfer language. So it's really just a matter of, that sort of negotiating point winning out in the conversations that are happening between the legislature and the executive.
Yeah, and Chris is on the board, right, of the New York State Association of Counties, and we've talked about their role.
And I had a conversation with a high level DOB staffer last week. I was in Albany for a conference, and basically what I was told is, we hear you, we need that money. And from our take, from the county's perspective, the state's current proposed budget between the executive and the 2 one-house budgets is a very vanilla election year budget. It is completely ignoring the fiscal realities surrounding us and is not addressing any of the looming fiscal crises that we know are coming. So we are telling our members, this budget's not bad, next year is likely to be atrocious. And that was essentially what we were getting from DOB staffers behind the scene, was like, we're gonna need every piggy bank we've got in the coming years to fix this. So they hear us, I don't know that it's gonna matter.
The Iowa people were somewhat successful in getting their monies back. They threatened litigation.
Yeah, unfortunately, the status of their fund is slightly different from ours in that theirs is a fiduciary fund. And so I think there's more of a legal argument that they have than we do. But Chief Judge Wilson and I have talked about it. I think we have the strong moral argument that this funding is dedicated for a special purpose, and it's for the counties. It's not for the state to balance their budget. So, that's the message we keep working with.
I agree with that wholeheartedly, not to be too cynical. If anybody ever pays attention to their wireless cellular bill, there's a 911 surcharge at the bottom, statutorily from the FCC and from state law, that those funds are required to go to the entity that operates the 911 center, what we call PSAP. The state has not given us that money in 20 years.
Wow.
So-
That's
The state. So we've been fighting that. We feel like we have the moral high ground on that too. Like, we've already done the 911 centers and they still don't give us the money.
Yeah.
There must be so much money.
They give us a small portion of it, but not statutorily what is required.
Small time.
Bert, you want to talk about ILS office updates?
Sure, this will be fairly quick. We've got several pending PDAs, so those are budget director approvals. These are people who have accepted positions with ILS, and we're going through the paperwork process now. One is Lucelli, of course, for her new position. And then 3, I'm not going to name the candidates since they're still going through the process, but we have accepted offers from an administrative assistant with our research team. That's a new position that'll be based in Albany. A CDR, criminal defense representation team counsel for Region G, which will be a Buffalo-based position. And then a family court representation counsel position that we will be filling for the first time. That's an Albany-based position. We are currently actively recruiting for a litigation resource attorney with Claudia's team, the statewide appellate support center.
Anybody knows anybody, please. Please.
And then we will soon be both backfilling Lucelli's position with the research team, as well as seeking to fill a criminal defense representation counsel position for Region A, which is the New York City and Long Island region. That is an Albany-based position. So more on that very likely in June.
The only other update we have for the board is at the next meeting in June, Mindy will be conducting a training on ethics, and this is a training that board members are required to do, and Mindy makes that requirement easy for you to fulfill. So just wanted to let people know, and that'll be after we adjourn the meeting, we'll move right into that ethics training.
And then over here.
Yeah.
Okay, you don't have to go down to Beaver Street.
No.
Do you know about how long that might be, just for flight plans?
30 to 45 minutes.
Oh.
If you take it with the state, it's probably 2 hours. I think we can. Yes.
Great. Well, if there's nothing else, we're adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.